We are back once again. Best and worst matchups for fantasy players. We've been making these every single week this year, and we've been hitting on a lot of these, about 60% of our good and bad matchups, which is really, really good considering we're not talking about the obvious starts. We're not talking about start CD Lamb or start Justin Jefferson because that doesn't help you. That's too obvious. We're not saying bench Nelson Aguilar because everyone's benching Nelson Aguilar. We're talking about more of the fringe players, the guys ranked from like RB or wide receiver 24 to 36 in that range for the most part. And we've been hitting on these, and we're going to kick it off with the quarterbacks like we always do. And we're starting off, and I know, please don't turn off the video, Bryce Young. Now, when we evaluate good and bad matchups for quarterbacks, we're looking at offensive line pass blocking versus defensive line pass rushing. And I like this matchup for Carolina. Now, will Bryce Young make the necessary throws? I don't know. I just can't predict that. And no one can really predict that. But will he have time to throw the ball? I believe so. I believe he will. And that's key for almost every single quarterback out there. And you know what? We saw Bryce Young at least look decent last week, 15.6 points in 4-point per passing touchdown. And I just like this matchup. Carolina allowing pressure on 25% of their quarterbacks dropbacks, and New Orleans getting a pressure rate on 28%. So it's not like a huge advantage, but I think it's a pretty good advantage for Carolina. Bryce Young's going to have the time. I hope we see the necessary development in his game to kind of continue to start him, even though I know we all want Andy Dalton starting. Next up, we have another player here, Caleb Williams, going up against Arizona Cardinals. Arizona Cardinals only have a sack conversion rate of 13%, which is in the bottom half of the league. So I like that for Caleb Williams. He's going to be able to scramble a little bit, buy some time, make some throws, or even get some rushing yards. And also Arizona only getting pressure on 26% of the opposing drop back for or pass rushing against opposing quarterbacks, which is second worst in the entire NFL. Only Tennessee is worse. So I like that for Caleb. He's going to have time, and that's so key for Caleb. And I also don't think this secondary for the Cardinals is that great. So, I think this is a good matchup for Caleb. I think we could see a bounce back week. And I thought last week was going to be good for Caleb. He was actually on this list as a good matchup. I think we need to start taking Washington more serious as a good defense. So Caleb Williams, I think, bounces back this week. And Joe Flacco, consensus ranking QB 21. So we have all quarterbacks 29, 12, and 21. I like this for Joe Flacco going up against Minnesota. I know Minnesota does get a good amount of pressure, 33%, which is one of the high. It's in the top, I believe, 10 in the league. Their sack conversion rate is in the top half at 16%. That being said, I like Indianapolis. They're only giving up a pressure rate on 23% of their quarterbacks dropbacks, which is good to see. So I think they can do a pretty good job. This is a pretty good matchup of an offensive line versus a defensive line. I think Indianapolis has a slight edge here. We'll see. But I think Joe Flacco is a startable piece here, even in one quarterback league. So also Minnesota gives up the most yards, I believe, to quarterbacks and receivers. So something to note there. Now, some bad matchups for quarterbacks you may be thinking about starting. Baker Mayfield, consensus ranking QB 17, so maybe you're not thinking about starting him, but he is the QB 2 in points per game, right? He is still the QB 2 in points per game, and he was still good last week without Godwin and Evans. He put up 24.3 points without Godwin or Evans. I don't love this matchup, though, for Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers against the Chiefs. The Chiefs defense is legit. They shut down the run. They're tough against the pass. They're probably the best defense in the entire NFL. They get a pressure rate on 35% of the opposing quarterbacks dropbacks, which is insane. Justin Herbert is another one. Again, maybe you're thinking about starting him more in a deeper league, but anyone going against Cleveland, to me, is just a bad matchup. I have almost every quarterback going up against Cleveland as a bad matchup this year in these videos, and it's kind of proven to be working. Cleveland's middle of the road when it comes to points allowed to quarterbacks, but I think that's weighed heavily by 1 or 2 games, if I remember correctly. So Justin Herbert, if you were thinking about starting him, I don't love it against Cleveland. I think they're going to try and run the ball a little bit more. And so, yeah, I'm not a big fan of Herbert going up against Cleveland. That's it for the quarterbacks. Just two bad matchups. Into the running backs, good matchups. And again, what we look at here is the offensive versus defensive line in run blocking and run defense. And Chuba Hubbard is one of my favorite. The Detroit guys are my favorite this week, but you're obviously starting the Detroit guys, so I didn't bring them up. Chuba Hubbard in Carolina is my next favorite going up against the Saints. The Saints give up, get this, guys, they give up 1.73 yards before contact, the Saints, on defense, which means your running back, whenever you get a carry, on average, the running back for that team, or the opposing team, going up against the Saints, is getting 1.73 yards before they're even getting touched. So let's just say you get touched and you fall forward. You're probably getting 4 yards, 3 yards, 3, 4, 5 yards a carry here. That's the worst in the NFL, and it's not even close. The Giants are next Washington's next at 1.67. And also Carolina, they're not doing a great job at run blocking, but I just really like this matchup for Carolina and Chuba Hubbard, and Jonathan Brooks isn't there. And we're kind of seeing what I predicted for Chuba Hubbard. People were asking all the way back in the beginning of October, what about Jonathan Brooks? What about Jonathan Brooks? What about Jonathan Brooks? And I said, target after the bye. After the bye is when you should be targeting it. We have 2 more games. This week's game, Jonathan Brooks is out. Next week's game, we'll see if Jonathan Brooks plays, and then they have their bye, and then we can start worrying about Jonathan Brooks, in my opinion. Raheem Mostert, this also applies for Achane, but you're obviously starting Achane. I like this matchup against Buffalo for the Dolphins running backs. It's tough to throw against Buffalo, but they do give up a decent amount of points to pass catching running backs and just running backs in general, because they prevent the deep pass. And in order to prevent the deep pass, you need to play your safeties back. And so I think there's going to be a lot of space and a lot of points available to the running backs, both on the ground and through the air, for the Dolphins. And so I like this for Mostert. I think he's a flex this week. I think he's a flex play this week, and I'm fine with starting him, even with Achane there. And he was good last week. Mostert was last week. Mostert. Let me just double check this for you. Mostert in standard had 15 points. I usually go by half PPR rankings, but Mostert had 15.5, so he got one pass. 15.5 points last week. And, he's been pretty good 3 of the last 4 weeks, 10.8 points, a bye week, 3 points, and then 15.5 since he's come back from his injury. So he's been pretty solid this year. Josh Jacobs. Now, you're probably going to be starting Josh Jacobs because you can't ignore a guy. I think 3 of the last 4 weeks has had 20-plus touches. You just can't ignore that in fantasy football. Volume is king no matter what, but I hate this matchup for the Packers. I think it's a terrible matchup. By the way, we're into bad matchups. Only 2 good matchups for running backs this week. Obviously, Detroit shuts down the run. I think they are number 3 against running backs. So don't love that for Josh Jacobs. I think it's a tough matchup for him. Into our next bad matchup for the running back position, Rachaad White. And this also applies to Bucky Irving, but Rachaad White was slightly higher in the rankings of half PPR. I think they're back-to-back, actually. Consensus ranking RB28 for Rachaad White, RB29 for Bucky Irving. And are they going to catch passes? Yes. Are they going to do much on the ground? I don't really think so. Tampa Bay, by the way, going up against Kansas City, who are number 1 against running backs. I just think this could be a tough day. It could be a low-scoring game, tough day for the Buccaneers offense overall. So, yeah, I don't love it for the Buccaneers players this week at all. And then Ramondre Stevenson, consensus ranking RB24. Really good last week, Ramondre was. Don't know why I'm speaking like Yoda there, but Ramondre was really good last week. He scored the 2 touchdowns, obviously, but don't love this matchup against the Titans, who haven't been as good lately, but they've still been pretty good, in my opinion. But the one thing in favor of Stevenson is this game should be relatively close, and they'll be able to run the ball. They'll be able to feed him. So I'm still fine with starting Stevenson, but I do think there's a chance that the Titans kind of shut him down, especially if Brissett starts and they can kind of key in on the run. So hopefully it's Drake May. I don't know if we had that announcement I know he had a chance to play. Into some wide receiver matchups that I like, and this is looking at individual players and who they'll be matched up against for the most part. I keep going back to him, but Jackson Smith-Njigba without DK Metcalf, most likely he's doubtful. We just haven't seen it from JSN. He's getting the targets. I think he's on pace for like 130 targets or something. But we're just not seeing the production materialize with all that. But I do like this matchup. I think he's going to be matched up mostly against Josh Wallace of the Rams. And the interesting thing about Rams, like the underlying numbers show that they're terrible against receivers and passing, defending the pass. But they've been kind of lucky, and it's been kind of hidden by the fact that they've played a lot of teams that run the ball. If you just look at their schedule, they played the Lions, who are a run-heavy team. Cardinals, not so much. 49ers, a run-heavy team. Bears were running the ball against the Rams. Packers are kind of a run-heavy team. Vikings, they've been a run-heavy team this year. So Seattle is the opposite. They're passing the ball more than anyone else in the league. I think we could see a good game for Geno, for JSN. So I'm liking this potential matchup here. Jalen Coker, who's probably not on people's radars to at least start this week, but going up against the Saints guys, and I think he's mostly going to go up. All the Saints guys, I kind of like his matchup here. I do think he goes up against Ugo Amadi in the slot the most. I think David Moore and Leggett probably play on the outside, and Coker's going to be playing more in the slot. And I love that matchup for Coker, and he was good last week. He's a undrafted rookie out of Holy Cross. It's impressive to see what he's doing, to be honest, being undrafted and already kind of cracking the lineup. So I think he's a sneaky deeper league play here or DFS or whatever. So I like Jalen Coker this week. And Ladd McConkey, consensus ranking wide receiver 23, going up against Greg Newsome. I do think that Ladd McConkey's coming to his own a little bit. He's a rookie. We always talk about rookies need some time. And now you look at McConkey, and he's wide receiver 27 in half PPR in points per game, which is a startable piece. In full PPR, he's also wide receiver 27. And he gives you a pretty safe floor. Here's his weeks: 14.9, 4.6, 7.4, 17.7, 8.3, 9.6, 29.1 since the bye. So he literally, he's had one bad game and then two kind of meh games, and then everything else has been good, at least decent. So I like this for McConkey. He's going to be lined up against Newsome, who's not playing that well this year in the slot. And on the other side of this game, Cedric Tillman, which I know a lot of people might be thinking about starting. And I get it. And one thing I'll say about, he's going up against the Chargers. Tarheeb's still probably matched up the most against him, but their outside receivers in general have been pretty good. Chargers defense seemingly is better, right? You just look at the numbers here. They are number 7 against quarterbacks, number 2 against running backs, number 3 against receivers, and whatever against tight ends. I think they're near the middle of the road or something. And so you see that and you think, wow, Chargers defense is legit. But then you look at their schedule and you say, well, who have they played that really, really scares you? And I'll read you off their schedule really quickly. Chargers played the Raiders week 1. I don't think anyone's really, worried about the Raiders passing offense. They played the Bryce Young Panthers week 2. They played Justin Fields Steelers week 3. Stop me when you hear a really good passing offense. They played the Chiefs in week 4. Week 4. Chiefs are not a great passing offense. They played Bo Nix and the Broncos week 6. They played Kyler Murray and kind of shut him down. And then they played Spencer Rattler and Jake Haener. They've been super lucky. 6 of their 7 games have been against tough, not so great passing offenses. And even the Cardinals are kind of up and down. You can argue all of them. So, am I okay with starting Tillman? Yes, but I do think it is a tough matchup. So keep an eye on that. And then Calvin Ridley, if he plays, I know he was on the injury report. Titans are just decimated by injuries. This week, Calvin Ridley was at DNP full practice and then DNP. So If he plays, I still don't love it. Going up against the Patriots, Christian Gonzalez, and all their guys, don't love it. Especially just this defense overall, I think is pretty solid and can kind of make Will Levis see some ghosts. And we'll finish up with tight ends. Noah Fant, who I like again this week. He's kind of on this list each and every week. He's going up against Roseboom here of the Rams. I like it for Noah Fant, who has seen some decent weeks recently in PPR. Noah Fant, he's the tight end. Let's see here. 20 overall, 6.9 points per game, but he had 2 back-to-back double-digit point weeks in weeks 6 and 7. So he's been solid at times. DK Metcalf is out, so I think he's a sneaky play here. And Rams give up the 3rd most points to tight end. So I think I like Noah Fant this week. Jonnu Smith is another one going up against Spectre. Jonnu Smith has actually had some decent weeks as well, and he kind of didn't go away last week. By the way, we're looking at against Buffalo. Buffalo gives up things over the middle of the field, and I'm just double checking. Dolphins had played the Bills already, right? I thought the Dolphins and Bills had played. They have week 2 for week 2 for Dolphins playing the Bills here. And Jonnu Smith went 6 for 53. 6 for 53, 7 targets. This is what Buffalo does. They shut, especially against Miami, they shut down the deep stuff and they say, beat us over in the middle. We don't care. And that's why slot receivers, tight ends, running backs do well against Buffalo. And it's showing up in the stats, right? It's showing up in the stats a little bit. So I like Jonnu Smith this week, who's had a couple good weeks. And then Cole Kmet playing against the Cardinals, going up against Kaiser White. I like that matchup for him. Cardinals are always kind of bad against tight ends in general. Kaiser White's having a tough year this year, in my opinion. He's giving up a catch percentage rate of 87%. He's giving up 1.53 yards per route covered, and he's giving up 0.2 fantasy points per route run against him. So 0.27. So you're getting a quarter of a point essentially every time you run a route against him. So I like that for Cole Kmet. And then a couple of bad tight end matchups I don't like. Zach Ertz against Isaiah Simmons. Isaiah Simmons has been doing a pretty good job at stopping tight ends. For the most part, Giants are 4th best against tight ends. And just looking at the numbers here, Isaiah Simmons is only giving up, go back to what I said about Kaiser White, 0.12 point. So you're getting a 10th of a fantasy point per route run against him, Isaiah Simmons, versus a quarter of a point versus Kaiser White, right? 50% cash rate for Isaiah Simmons, going up against him, and 0.67 yards per route covered. So just you see the difference there. Tough matchup for Zach Ertz this week, who's been pretty good this year, tight end 13. And then Hunter Henry, who's also been pretty good this year, tight end 14, going up against Jack Gibbons of the Titans. So 0.19 fantasy points per route covered, so about a 1/5 of a point. But they're only a 9% target percentage rate. He's been pretty good this year. Hasn't been targeted a whole lot, which shows teams are kind of avoiding him to a certain extent. So there you have it, guys. These are my best and worst matchups. Please make sure to like and subscribe. We're trying to get to 800 subscribers before the end of November. So let's see if we can do it. We are 78 away. So let's see if we can get there. Appreciate you all. Like and subscribe. Catch you all in the next